Section 1 in Ash Wednesday deals with the eagle, and particularly the chained eagle of humans making choices that actually bring them down from what they're meant to be, preventing them from flying. And Eliot looks at that in Section 1. When we move to Section 5 in Ash Wednesday, he begins with John, the book of John, and John is considered of the four gospel writers the icon of the eagle. And so Eliot is making a distinctive and conscious move to recovering what the eagle is like, not only a divine reality of the eagle and the great flight under the blue canopy from what can be seen from above and what is seen from below, but the difficulties also of that. And so in Section 1, we get, or Section 5, we get Eliot turning to the book of John as the great theologian, the mystic, the eagle in that sense. And so let me begin with reading this. If the lost word is lost, now when he says this, he's using small w, and in that sense, it's not the immediacy of the divine word, capital W, or logos in that sense. It's the human speech which articulates the divine message. But if it's lost, if the spent word is spent, if the unheard, unspoken word, capital W, is unspoken and unheard, remembering this poem comes out in 1930, the crash of the market had occurred. Europe was in political disarray. And so the question is, was there any truth? Was there any order? Was there any center? And it seemed at this point that the word was lost, even the human word of truth, the human word of wisdom, the human word of insight. It seemed to be spent. It was exhausted. It was no more. It was unheard. It was not even being spoken. And even the capital W, the immediacy of the divine word, was unspoken. So there was silence. There seemed to be no relationship anymore between eternity and time, between God and humanity. It's unspoken. It's just unheard. And so humanity at this particular point in history was very much seen as orphaned. The ceiling between eternity and time seemed to be iron, and there was no relationship. Still, Eliot says, still is the unspoken word, small word, the word unheard, capital W, the word without a word, the word within the world and for the world. So he's pointing out that even though what seems to be the problem, what seems to be the dilemma of humans at this particular point in civilization, the word was without a small word, the word within the world and for the world. So you have the notion of the logos, it is for the world. And the light shone in darkness. So here he's bringing John again. So of course the word is so foundational to the book of John, particularly the prologue. In the beginning was the word was with God, the word was God. And so you have the word, but then he also brings it here in John 1-5, and the light shone in the darkness. So there is this ongoing reality of the light shining in the darkness, attempting to overcome the darkness. The word is attempting to speak, but the world, the darkness is against the word. So there is this tension. There is this clash of which stanza 1 is highlighting in Ash Wednesday between the capital word, the logos, which is trying to speak the light into the world, into the cave, as it were. But in fact, the darkness is against the word. The unstilled world still whirling. And so you have the world itself that is unstilled. It's not still. It's in chaos. It's in panic. It's being pulled in a variety of directions, which is very much makes a poem like this relevant for today. It's whirling in different directions. There's no center. There's nothing that holds it together. People are at odds with one another. They're polarized. They're going at one another. But it's going about the center of the silent word. So the word is silent, capital W, the logos. It can't be heard because of the busyness, the franticness, the clashes in time between different political, religious, personal tensions. Just the very word that is light, that can bring life, it's silent. And it's not that it's necessarily absent. It's that because the human cacophony, the babble of voices, the noise, that can't hear the silent word that breaks people through. And then out of this, you get, of course, what Eliot said draws from one of the great minor prophets in Judaism in Micah 6:3. O my people, what have I done unto you? And so here you have the word, the mediating word of a prophet, Micah, drawing from obviously the divine word, asking, as it were, within Micah itself. He's speaking to the Jews at this particular period. What have I done that you don't listen anymore? Why deafness? Why wax in the ears of the soul? What have I done that has caused you to turn your back against me? And the whole book of Micah, of course, plays on this again and again, this theme. So Eliot picks up the book of Micah. So when he thinks of the word, he not only is drawing from John, but he's drawing from Micah itself. And as it were, God is asking the 20th century, O my people, what have I done unto you or unto thee, that which have brought you to this place where there is no listening, there is no attentiveness. It's just this constant movement and whirling in an unstilled world in which people are at one another. And then Eliot moves on into the second stanza, says, where shall the word be found? So it's this searching, where can the small word be found, the mediating word of the prophet? And again, he's connecting the small word with the prophetic sayings of the Jewish tradition. Where shall the word be found? Where will the word resound? So where are the prophets of old? Where are those biblical prophets in the 20th century that can speak to the dire dilemma of the 1920s, the 1930s, which Eliot is moving into, in which chaos is about to emerge in war, the rise of Hitler in Germany and Mussolini and Franco, and the tensions and clashes here. So where shall the word be found? Where will the word resound? Not here. There is not enough silence. So we're back again to silence. So Eliot is constantly contrasting silence, stillness, attentiveness with the unstilled word, the busyness, the clash, the crash in culture and civilization, where there is not listening anymore, and where there is not listening, then the word, small word NW, cannot be heard. So there's not enough silence, not on the sea or on the islands, not on the mainland, in the desert, or the rainland, for those who walk in darkness. And here Eliot is drawing from another prophet in the Jewish tradition, Isaiah. So Isaiah 9:2, where Isaiah says, for those who walk in the darkness have seen a great light. And so this refers earlier into the poem where the light shines in darkness. And the darkness, and the Greek word here, they can't overcome it in that sense. So Eliot, once again, when he hears the word small w, he's referring to the Jewish prophets who mediate the divine word to humans and speak truth and light and beauty and goodness into a world. But that world, because of its busyness, its darkness, can't hear, can't see. And so you get the chaos of what's going on. And this poem is as relevant then as it was for now, in the midst of some of the tensions and clashes of what we're living with today, and the Russian-Ukrainian war, and many other places, the Jews, the Palestinians. We could go on and on with this sort of stuff, in which those who walk in the darkness long for the light, but because of their own inability to hear, their own franticness, their own simple way of making sense of the world, in fact, they remain in the darkness, and the light cannot get through into the cave of the soul in that sense. Both in the daytime and in the nighttime, the right time and the right place are not here. So there's this constant jostling between the word, the light, trying to break into the cave of darkness, and yet people content with their shadows and fighting over their shadows that they call reality. As he says, there's no place of grace for those who avoid the face. One can refer here, of course, to C.S. Lewis's fine work, Till We Have Faces. And often it is the face that can reveal reality, the reality of the soul, in terms of the light speaking through the face. And so, but there's no grace for those who avoid the face, who turn to other faces, turn to other places to solve the difficult economic, political, social, religious, cultural problems of the time. So they keep avoiding reality, avoiding through 1,000 distractions, what Eliot would talk about, distracted by distraction through distractions. So there's no time to rejoice for those who walk among noise and deny the voice. So we can see Eliot very much working off Johannine themes of light and darkness, cave and light, shadows and reality. So he's very much drawing from the Johannine notion of the eagle who flies above the darkness, the clouds, but can see what's going on, but people don't want to see the eagle in that sense. And then he turns in stanza 3, will the veiled sister. So on the one hand, in stanza 2, you have those who don't want to see. So there's a variety of figures or intellectual positions or philosophical traditions that he's articulating in section 5. So the first one that he's discussing is those who just don't want to see. They don't want to hear. They're so addicted to the opiate of their busyness, to ideological commitments. They're in the darkness. They're very much in the cave. But when he moves into the next section, we're moving into a different type. Will the veiled sister, and of course section 4 dealt with the silent sister. This is the same. We're back to Beatrice again. Will the veiled sister pray for those who walk in darkness, who choose thee and oppose thee? So these are divided people now. On the one hand, they say, yes, there must be something more that transcends time, and yet on the other hand, in their decisions and their thinking, they oppose the very longing. So they're almost like Hamlet figures. They're yes and no, and they're paralyzed by being pulled in opposite and conflicting directions. Interesting, in Eliot's poem in 1917, the love song of Prufrock, Hamlet, Prince Hamlet is the key figure, in which people can long for something that they know takes them out of the cave that they're in, the shrunken world there. On the other hand, they're pulled to oppose the very thing they long for. So they live in this tension between longing for something more, yet refusing to go in the direction where that more is. And so those who are torn on the horn between season and season, between life and death, between knowing and unknowing, saying yes to where they could go, yet retreating where they need to go in their life, between time and time, between hour and hour. So it's this Hamlet figure, the Prince Hamlet, who's pulled to and fro. When I finished my BA, I did my graduating paper in philosophy and literature on Hamlet. And Hamlet is the quintessential figure who knows what he needs to do, what he should do, what he must do to vindicate the death or the murder of his father. Yet he's always finding excuses, in fact, not to do what he knows he must do. This section is the Hamlet temperament of the modern world, who longs for something greater, yet on the other hand, the very longing is constantly negated by retreating from the direction of which the longing could take them. So between hour and hour, word and word, power and power, those who wait in darkness. And so you have this waiting, but on the other hand, they're in a different type of darkness than the first, who almost make a virtue out of darkness. These are the ones who wait in darkness, almost in the wasteland of what Eliot was dealing with in his 1922 work, The Wasteland, which is, interestingly enough, it's 100 years this year since The Wasteland was published. So the second type of people are pulled in conflicting directions. Will the veiled sister pray for children at the gate? So it is these people who are trying to get to the gate of life. They're at the gate, but they don't want to go through into the challenges of where this new opening may occur for them in their soul and their mind and their imagination. So will the veiled sister pray for the children at the gate, who will not go away but cannot pray? So they're torn between cynicism and skepticism. They're torn between idealism and realism, and they can't moderate or mediate between the two very, very well. And pray for those who choose and oppose. So we can see these tensions of the second type of temperament. It's the Hamlet temperament. And again, then Eliot turns to Micah. Oh, my people, what have I done unto thee? And so it's like God calling to the people, the word, the logos, the light coming into darkness. What have I done to you that you do not want to open your minds, your imaginations, your heart, the eagle within that can spread wide wings to take to the blue canopy. Why do you cling to the addiction of being chained in that sense? And then in that sense, we're back to, of course, Plato's cave, or Rousseau's talking about being chained. And so you get this questioning of the Logos. What have I done that keeps you in this state of being chained when you know you want to get out of the chaining? What are the reasons for this in the soul that prevents a person from moving beyond the addiction of Prince Hamlet in that sense, which paralyzes them, which makes them impotent? So this questioning then comes to those who are pulled in different direction. And then the final stanza: will the veiled sister between the slender yew trees, and of course the yew tree is the image of death and resurrection, of life in the midst of darkness, the evergreen tree which is always there, pray for those who offend her. Because the veiled sister is the one who's moved beyond the Hamlet stage. She's moved beyond the darkness. She's out of the cave in that sense. But we can't see her. She doesn't talk. She's the silent sister. She, in that sense, veiled. She speaks through her actions, as we noted in the previous one, where she talks of trivial things. If those who want to live at that level should be with them. She's in ignorance and knowledge of eternal dollars, so she knows the suffering and the struggle. She moves among others as they walk, who then she makes the strong the fountains and makes fresh the springs. So she brings life. She's actually there to offer the solid fountain life. But you get many who are hesitant. They don't want to move in that direction, and yet they know they're restless where they are. They're paralyzed, they're stalled, but they don't know how to move from where they are to the next step in the journey. They know what they want to be free from, but they're cynical and skeptical about moving toward where the veiled sister or the silent sister can take them. So will the veiled sister between the slender yew trees pray for those who offend her, because they do offend her, because she actually can point the way out of the cave into greater light if they but see what she does with the fountains, and she sees what she does with the rocks and what she in fact offers in life direction. And so at what point does prayer come to an end, when people are stubbornly frozen in a certain position in their will? And in their will, they just do not want to move. Their desire may take them one way, their longings, their hopes, but in fact, when it comes to acting in the will, they offend the sister, who in fact points the way to the soul's deepest longings. And they're terrified and cannot surrender and affirm before in the world. So on the one hand, you can even get religious people in that sense, they affirm before the world the importance of transcending time, of looking for the light, of trying to heed the word. And so before the world, and yet they deny between the rocks. And of course, we're here dealing with Odysseus as sailing between Scylla and Charybdis. So when they very much hold high the ideals of some important issues and goodness and truth and beauty. They're often somewhat cynical of it when they have to sail between the rocks of time, and how to do that wisely. And the silent and veiled sister, in fact, gives them the discernment how you sail between the rocks. And in the last desert, so many are stuck in the desert between the last blue rocks. And of course, blue rocks, blue is always the color, the rock which is blue is the sign of the blue sky, of eternity, of hope, and where, in fact, the journey might take people if they're willing to actually act on the deepest longings. But they're in the last desert between the last blue rocks. So the desert is in the garden. So there's this garden in the soul, but the desert is there, and the garden is in the desert as well. So Eliot's looking at this tension between garden, desert, garden of drought. And this is his final line. He says, spitting from the mouth of the withered apple seed. So in fact, that is the very thing that people who are either caught in the darkness per se, or those who live in the Hamlet-like tension, that's the withered apple seed of the ego that is deep within them. Until they know how to spit from their mouth or spit from their soul that withered apple seed, they will never be able to follow the silent sister or the veiled sister into the fullness of light, which takes them out of the cave in that sense. And so the final line, and then he comes back to, "Oh, my people," which we're back again to Micah. He doesn't end that with saying, "Oh, my people, what have I done unto thee?" He allows then the reader, the listener, the one who would follow the silent, the veiled sister, to answer that. What has been done to those who prevents them then from moving on to the next stage in their life? What are those chains which shackle them? What are those internal cages that they're in? What is that paralysis that creates that within them, that means that they can't move to the next step of the journey? And so in section 5 of Ash Wednesday, Eliot, in fact, is looking at the combination of the prophetic word, small word that we'll get in both John, the prologue to John, Micah, and then Isaiah, but all those subtle obstacles that prevent people from actually moving on to the blue sky of eternity and the relationship of that to time, of which, in fact, the book of John is all about, John being the book of the eagle.